Well, part of the series I'm trying to do with PPG is to use the expertise of people like Casey. How are you today, Casey?
Good, thanks, Howard.
So you would have seen maybe Casey with the spray guns, cleaning, using. It's involved up at the training centre. And I've got him down to my place today because we're going to look at my air system. And then once we've looked at mine, we're going to look at what sort of systems people are using both in commercial,
Yep.
but also what you might be using to pump up your bike tyres,
Yep.
is one of Casey's sayings.
Yep.
So what I'm going to do is just quickly show you what I've got. So this is my quite small booth. I've had a SATA 2-part system here, and we're going to talk about the 2 and then the 3 because I don't use an air-fed hood. So we've got that system in here, and then feeding that. Watch out for me mower, Casey.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to be using that today, that's for sure.
So my system I've had now for nearly 10 years, and the fact that we're going to filming, we had a bit of a clean up this week, so the place is looking pretty neat and tidy. We've just done a little bit of research. What did you end up working out, Casey?
17 CFM.
So 17 CFM.
Or 480 litres per minute now in the new world. So.
And it's 3-phase because I'm fortunate to have 3-phase here in my workshop at home. And when I put this in, the reason I put it in was my old compressor, which was mounted to this tank, decided to have a little heart attack and put oil through the system and all those sorts of things. So I decided that I would bite the bullet and do it properly. So I took that tank and cleaned it up and give it a pressure pack and hung it on the wall to use it for extra storage. And we'll talk about storage and all later on. And what I do is I come from this compressor around into a dryer. So it's like a refrigerator, and we'll talk about the different types of ways to take moisture out of the air. And then it runs into this tank and then around to the main filters in the booth. That's what I'm running. What Casey and I are going to do now is we're going to go in the workshop, we're going to sit down at a table, and we're going to talk about where you start and how you go about putting together an air system for whether it's your commercial operation or whether it's something you're doing at home.
Yeah.
Righto, so we've moved out of there, and I'm going to throw over to Casey. So Casey, first of all, tell us a little bit about your background and why are you here basically, and what's your role in PPG?
I'm here because you asked me to be. So basically, I'm a spray painter ever since I left school, and constant about moved into a sales role, technical role, and now I just sort of help out wherever I need to, looking after large accounts basically.
Mr.
Now.
Fix It.
If I have to be, yeah.
Yeah.
Not saying that I know everything, but when you get older, you've seen a lot of it,
Yeah,
so
and you're still, you've still got your hands on the tools as well.
Still active, yeah. Not as much as I'd like to be, as we were saying before. The body doesn't like doing it.
Doesn't get any easier, that's for sure.
Yeah,
So Casey, I had my notes, and when you came down, we sort of looked at those quickly, and you said you really like to work in reverse to what I was thinking. So just give us a bit of a rundown on your thoughts on air and what we need to think about.
So most typically you would think that if you want to set yourself up with compressed air in a workshop, the first thing is I'll go down to the supplier and buy a compressor. And why I said we want to work backwards is because we need to know what we're going to do first. So like I said before, are we just going to pump up the kids' balls or the tyres on a push bike? We don't need to go through half the stuff that we're going to talk about. Or am I going to set myself up like you are in a workshop where you want to do the odd bit of paint work here and there?
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the difference there is that, whether you're on your own or whether you're trying to cater to a workshop full of people, which makes a massive difference.
And then also, are we going to cater for expansion? Because you're on your own today, but then through the week you get a few other guys come here and work with you. So.
And something I'll throw in early, because I hadn't sort of thought too much about it, but the industry's changing, and even at home people are changing, is that we're going away from air tools and more to battery.
More to battery, yeah.
So things like some of these tools, you can see that one's had a bit of use. Where you're running that and the air's just going constantly. And of course the value now is the noise, so there's a whole lot less noise. So a machine like that's been replaced by a battery tool. And then obviously the sanders. And I tended to do a lot by hand, but a lot of people have got drills, they've got, these sort of polishers and sanders. that are now becoming obsolete because of the battery side of things.
Yeah, yeah. And battery is made so much more energy efficient for the compressor. So like when we talk about compressor size, every one of these air tools is using some volume of air. Where the battery, we just plug it in, recharge it, put another one on, and away we go.
Yeah, so if you're in an environment where you've got 3 or 4 staff,
Yep.
and like you said earlier, one's on the spray gun in the booth, wondering why he's got no pressure, because out the back, one guy's polishing, one guy's paint, grinding or whatever.
So unfortunately, showing my age, when I'd go and do training or demonstrations in shops and various sizes, compressed air was always the issue. And you know, back in the day, it was the nozzle sizes that we'll talk about. You know, typically this would be a typical nozzle size that we would see in every shop back in the day. Now we're seeing something along the larger high flow type settings. You know, so when you make people aware of it, then they go, oh, okay, I need to change because we're evolving, you know. So.
Okay, so if we're looking at that compressor, say, I've got one here that was my dad's, and I think we worked out it's probably about a 12, maybe if we're lucky.
Maybe 12 if you're lucky, 10 to 12.
And I have painted a car with that a long time ago at Dad's place, and it's sort of like paint a panel, wait for it to catch up.
Yeah.
And it's to do with obviously compressor size, but also tank.
Yeah.
So there's obviously in the commercial world, there's things like screw compressors and obviously piston. What's the big variation there?
Well, a piston compressor will turn on and off as required. Most screw compressors will run all day, but they'll engage a clutch. So the motor is always running all the time, maybe in a lower capacity, but it's always engaged, and then it'll just kick in like an air conditioning clutch on your car. When it needs it, it'll turn on and then start pumping air again.
And of course, there's no oil involved, is there?
Not in the actual compressor part of it, in the motor side of it, obviously.
There is, but I mean, the issue there is that you take that out of the equation completely, don't you? Because if you've got a piston compressor, then effectively at some point, like a car, when it starts to wear out, you're potentially going to have oil coming into your air.
You don't really want a piston style compressor for breathing apparatus. Typically they use a rotary screw style compressor for breathing. Comes back to what's your requirements, what are you going to do? And
once again, the amount of use and how long, how big that compressor is determined by how many people are working and using that.
So in a normal shop, you would have, let's say 2 people, a panel beater and a painter working, and then multiple air leaks around the workshop, the good old air leak. And then someone like me walks in and it's like air leaks just annoy me, and most people who are working in an environment all day don't even notice that there's air leaks everywhere.
But if you're deaf like me, you can't hear them anyhow.
But the air leaks is like another person using some sort of tool,
Exactly.
So it's a capacity of volume that is being used,
So I know you had some notes there about what sort of air is required. So, we've got a spray gun sitting here because there's low pressure and high pressure.
Low pressure and high pressure. So if we go back to your compressor, we measured it out at 17 CFM. And typically when you're in the booth by yourself painting with your RP 5500, we're using somewhere in the vicinity, I wrote the notes down here, 10 CFM. Right. So you're well within half of what your compressor.
And that's when I'm painting, it does kick out because I'm using less than it's producing.
Yes, yeah.
But because of that second tank I put on, the one I salvaged,
more volume,
I'm at 350 litres, which is probably bigger than a lot of big workshops would have.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So now if I add Darren out here with this tool here, in this case it's a polisher, but a little sander, it's another 3 CFM. So now we're at 10 CFM with you spraying, and Darren out here with the sander at another 3 CFM, plus a few air leaks, we're starting to get to the maximum level of what that compressor can maintain. It'll do it, but it's not going to cut out.
Yeah, and the issue is what we're trying to avoid here. If you're in the booth and you're spraying, you want a consistent level of air. Whatever you choose to spray with, you want that to be the same, especially in the colour, so that you're not getting a variation in pressure at the gun.
Pressure and contamination. So in this case, heat, oil and water.
It's funny, Casey, something I just thought of that Johnny Aristis is always on to me about is it's not, when I set this up, I asked John some advice, and it's not so much pressure, but the actual quantity of
Quantity, yeah.
air. Because you can have pressure through a very small line,
Yeah.
but as soon as you take some load off it, it can't keep up.
It's like the hose and the finger. You know, when you put your finger over the hose, you will increase your pressure, but you won't get the volume.
Yeah, you
that
let
you
it
want.
go and then it slows down.
Slows down, yeah.
That's a good analogy,
Yeah.
Casey. I like that one. Righto, so get back onto the story. So the compressor size,
Yes.
I find what I've got sufficient for what I do. The little one, and we'll get a shot of that. That was my dad's. Is probably enough that if you're going to do a little bit, but not trying to do a full car. And if you're doing a full car, you almost need to have a smoko halfway through to maintain any sort of pressure at the gun.
Yeah.
The actual tank size. How much bearing does that have on the ability to use maybe a smaller compressor, but because you've got more capacity? In what you're doing. Have you got any thoughts on that?
The more you can have, the better.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you know, if you've got a large motor on a small tank, it's not going to keep up either way. It's a combination of the two.
Yeah.
So,
and talking about that, something that someone said to me a long time ago into a panel shop, I went in there and they had lines everywhere. And they were all like inch hard line.
yeah.
And they'd gone all the way around, and it was a good idea, and you mentioned to me earlier about it, is the fact that if that line is a continual loop, no matter where you are in that workshop, you're going to get the same pressure.
Same pressure, yeah.
But I said to them, why such big line? And the issue that they found, and that whoever advised them, is it's like having another tank. Because all those lines, being the size they are, the capacity of your whole workshop grows in air, because rather than having a big tank, you've actually got all of those lines. So if you're looking to put lines around your workshop, and I mean with mine there, I've used high pressure water line because I found it very cost effective and it was readily available at my hardware store. But anything in that sort of high pressure hard line that then gives you the ability to have more capacity and more quantity of air.
And going back to what you just said, you're using the water line, right? Now, I would definitely not recommend you using any type of breathing apparatus because it's not compatible with breathing.
Right.
Okay, so you know the reason why we're wearing breathing apparatus is for clean air, and no matter what your filtration is, if I'm putting dirty air in it, it's going to make the filtration work harder. The lifespan last a lot less. So if you wanted to go breathing apparatus, you'd have to change a lot in your workshop.
So that's because of the plastic?
Yeah, the plastics. They need to be certified. Yeah.
Okay. So all those little things.
All these little things, you know, and it goes back to future planning. You know, so we're talking about the compressor. Like my compressor at home, I use it for pumping up tyres, so I don't need a massive regulator and all that sort of stuff. But I don't want to work from home with it. But if I'm in your situation with a workshop, am I going to go down that path? I need to future plan it. You know, so
I think the issue there is that for people to understand is I'm a glorified home shop.
Exactly.
To go that next level, to be certified in everything you do, a lot of what I do wouldn't be certified.
Wouldn't be, probably.
Because effectively, as everyone knows, I class myself as a street machiner. I don't hold a trade certificate, but I've been taught by a lot of very good tradespeople. But at the same token, a lot of what I've done has been done on the basis of how can I make this work to achieve the goal that I'm trying to achieve. If I went from here and set up at a new estate or something and built myself a paint shop, it'd be a whole lot different to what this is.
Yeah, and it's a level up from where you are.
Exactly right.
And this is a level up from where you were in the first place.
I mean, we found some old stuff kicking around. One of my hoses out the back looks like it was a roll of fuel hose. 3/8 fuel hose with some Ryco fittings on it. And I mean, that's where we all start. And then we progressively improve as we go along. Righto, so we work out what size compressor we want. And I think that normally comes about by what we can afford. We'd all love to have the Rolls Royce, but sometimes we've got to settle.
A big bearing on it, yes.
Sometimes we've got to settle for a Falcon. So, compressor. Then we do the lines. Now we've got some fittings here, and I just grabbed a couple of bits of, probably fuel hose actually, just out of a box. Just to give you an idea, when you get your air hose, you need to check the size diameter of the hose inside,
Yes.
because what you can have is effectively what's classed as a 10 mil hose, but it might be outside diameter, not inside.
Not inside
I don't
diameter.
know.
Yeah.
And Casey happened to have one of these that he keeps in his toolbox, I think, to show people what you shouldn't do.
This was the standard when I was an apprentice.
I didn't think you were that old, Casey.
Unfortunately.
So this is probably a Ryco or something.
Yeah, that's what they were, right?
And it's 4 mil inside diameter. And then I had what probably was a Ryco, the next range of Ryco.
The next series.
Which is 5.6. And then this one here is what I'm using now is a Nitto, 7.5 nearly. And then this is the one they use up at the training centre, 7.6, so around the 7.5. Once again, it's all about getting the air through, and looking at my setup, Casey noticed I had one brass fitting on the line that goes to the gun, and he said, you need to have a look and see what size hole is in that, it might want replacing. I said, yeah, I might run the drill through that if it's a bit small. But I mean, I'm not having any issues at the moment, but the thing is to make sure that you've got, so what brand's that one, Casey?
That's I think that's pronounced Siegen.
Okay, and then, so there's those or the Nittos.
Very similar, yeah. These two here are the standard that we see in the trades
now.
Yeah.
And then the old brass ones is obviously too small.
Yeah.
So hose size, fitting size, and it's all about getting the amount of air to the gun. So between that and the spray gun and the compressor, we've got filters.
Yep.
Now, can you explain to me, I see it a lot on social media, a dunny roll filter.
Dunny roll filter. A dunny roll filter is a band-aid for a problem. It does its job, but it certainly wouldn't be painting a car with it, you know, because the enemy for all of us here is moisture, right? The dunny, if you've got moisture at the point where the dunny roll is, it's only a partial solution.
So it's called that obviously because it's a canister with a paper filter.
Yeah, it looks exactly like a toilet
and
roll.
I've heard people basically you can drop a dunny roll in it.
And they do a job.
Yeah.
To a point, you know. So like, I would definitely not be painting any cars with a dunny roll.
So we've all seen a fitting that's just leaking water.
Water. And all we're doing is band-aiding the water.
Right.
You know, so like we said before, in your situation, you've got nice size airlines, but you've got one fitting that's possibly too small, and that's a point of restriction.
Righto. So looking then, this is what we all seen and had.
Yep.
So this is off Dad's. And you've got a filter like that I always class as a filter, but like Casey is, it's really a regulator.
It's just a regulator.
With a bit of a water trap attached to the bottom.
Probably more of an indicator than a trap.
And I mean, I've got one of these still on the wall out the back because my air is split into two. So one half goes to the booth and I can turn that on and off.
Yep.
Our normal air comes back into the workshop through one of these. And we must be lucky we just don't get a lot of moisture. What we do is we drain that big compressor every week without fail.
Yep.
So there's an alarm on my computer that says drain the computer. Drain the computer? Drain the tank.
Yeah.
Because that's your first point to actually get rid of it.
Build up, yeah.
And then Casey was showing me this one. So you can see the filter on that.
Yep, compared to this one.
So that's the filter that's I've now got in my booth. That's in the SATA setup, and we'll talk about those in a bit more depth in a minute. But this is the first thing you've got to have, but the next stage to that, if you're going to go to a point where you're going to do some painting, you need to make sure you've got better filtration.
Yeah, this is primarily a regulator. So we set a pressure on it, Darren's out here sanding, and the regulator will maintain that pressure and hopefully won't affect you too much in the booth.
Yeah.
Without this regulator, Darren's full noise at the tool, and he's sucking all the air out of the system.
So once again, I've got mine set, I don't know what the pressure is, but straight up and down, so it's not full pressure.
Yeah.
And it runs through the pull-out one, the one that's up there, Louise, on the wall.
Yeah.
So.
And it's not being used day in, day out, it's minutes at a time.
It's more about, if we're welding and cooling and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's not running tools or anything because we're primarily battery, but that is filtered from a water point of view by draining the tank and running one of these.
Yeah. Yeah.
My painting is on the other side. And it's probably a good opportunity, Casey, to talk about why we're so pedantic about the moisture.
Well, moisture is steam when it's put through a compressor, and once it needs to cool down to trap it again. So the steam will go through all your filters, even through a dunny roll to a point.
Yep.
So your compressor is just a big heat pump. And if it's working all day, it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Like you said, piston rings are worn out, more oil, more water, all turning into a vapor. And you can't see the vapor at the compressor, and you can see it at the other end. So when we have the dunny roll in there trying to stop as much filter water as we can, it will do it to a point, but it can only hold so much back. And if it's there, it's more of a problem as what's coming out the other end. Now, if I'm painting a nice job, if I'm introducing any sort of steam or moisture vapor through that airline, it'll mix with the paint as it's coming out of the nozzle of the paint, and you're literally putting contaminants straight there in the gun.
The issue there is, as a contaminant, is what?
Silicon for a start.
Okay,
if it's oil-based, it's silicon.
The finish.
The finish, you'll get like fish eyes.
And then obviously long-term, things like rust.
Probably more common solvent, humidity blisters, you know, back in the day, it's literally moisture in the paint, and as it gets hot and cold, it'll blister, little bubbles that look like pimples in the paintwork. And that's ruined. There's no way to fix it except take it all off and start again. Yeah.
So obviously critical. Righto, so we've got our compressor, we've got our lines the right size. Now, while I think of it, I don't know if you've come across it in what you've been doing, I read it somewhere, is that if you go and buy the wrong hose, it potentially, because it's made from oil, it could be bleeding oil from the hose into the system and causing fish eyeing. Yeah,
it can do. Today a lot of that stuff now is gone out of the system, so to speak, because like you said, your old hose out there from Dad's compressor, God knows what it's made out of, you know. Now we tend to have industry standards now. So
but the point I'm trying to make is if you just go, I'm not paying that. I'm going to go over here and buy a bit of hose from the Chinese shop. Be careful, because it could be
full of contamination.
And it's a bit like drinking water out of the garden hose. You can taste the plastic.
Exactly.
The same thing applies, is that you could have a silicon problem because the silicon is actually the oil coming out of the new hose.
It can be,
Because I've seen it where I've even replaced the hose, I've done everything. Well, the hose might be the wrong hose.
And they make the hoses with release agents. So
True.
A good hose might be cleaned, and a cheap hose might not be.
Right.
You know, so we don't know. You know,
so there's always something to learn about what we do.
In my role now, I do set up brand new shops, and we do have the best of everything, you know, but something as simple as like a sealing lubricant to be put on a thread. We get a new fitter come in and put a thread sealer on it or something. It might be silicon based, you know, so in theory, we've got the best of everything. We shouldn't have any issues. We pull the trigger and start straight away. We've got a problem, and we have to go back and work out what the issue is.
And then you start looking for the detail shop that's down the road somewhere.
WD-40 around the place.
Righto. So compressor, lines, filters. So once we go from this, the system I've got's the two-part.
The two-stage filter.
Two-stage filter from SATA. So you've got the three-stage here, because this is pretty much industry standard now if you're going to run an air hood, and most shops nowadays would run an air hood.
So this one here is the new model, which is what we call the 500 series, right? And this is the top of the line one, but you can also buy them in single stages. So you can buy one stage only, which only has the sintered filter particle side of it, right? Then you can get the two-stage like you've got, which has got that one and this one, still not breathable. And then the third stage is the activated carbon.
So I think mine's got the rotary one.
This here is inside here as well.
Oh, that's the pair of those are in that one?
This goes inside of it. Inside of it. So the air is spun on the outside. They call it cyclonic. So the air comes on the outside of it and spins to the outside of it. So any oil and water centrifugally gets thrown to the outside of this, and then runs down the inside, and then hopefully out the bottom.
And then it self-bleeds.
And then if I've got it here, there's a problem, and I still need to look at it, because it's an indication that there's a problem.
Right.
You haven't drained your tank, for example.
Yeah, you got too much water
much.
for the filter to handle.
We also have automatic bleeders in better situations these days, you know, so it's just when it detects any water, it automatically does it. So that could be broken.
I was actually talking to someone the other day where they had a dryer,
Yeah.
but the dryer every half hour
Yes.
self-bleeds.
Self-bleeds, yeah. So most shops now have a dryer with self-bleeding and a compressed tank with self-bleeding.
Yep.
But when we're at this level in the booth and there's something happening here, and in the setup in the shop, we'd have a clear tube running off of that, so you can actually see if there's anything coming. If there's a problem here, we need to work out why, because we shouldn't have anything here with the level of filtration that you've got with cooling and stuff like that.
Okay, so we've gone water, oil,
Water, oil, particle,
and now
activated charcoal for breathing. Now, there's two systems that you can have here. This one here is built into the system, and the car gets the benefit of breathable air as well as you.
Yep.
The other option that you can have is activated charcoal on the belt, and it only filters the air to your hood. So it's a bit more cost effective. Okay.
Right.
So in some cases they have both.
because this would be every 6 months.
6 months. 6 months to replace them. And in a commercial state, we're running every day, all day.
Yeah.
You're, like you said, you're 10
my
years.
6 months is probably 10 years.
Yeah, exactly right, yeah. But this is activated, it still has to be replaced regardless of time, of usage. Once it's out of the packet, it's replaced.
Okay.
So,
Righto, Casey. So we talked about air hoods, and based on that, we've just turned the camera off and grabbed your air hood out of the car.
Nice and new, hardly used.
Yeah, I don't like you doing much, mate. Mate, give us a fairly short rundown, I guess, on your history with the industry and how we've ended up here.
So when I started, unfortunately, I was lucky to have a paper mask, with pretty much a hanky around the with old lead-based acrylic paints, and you just done what the tradesman done, you know. So it was quite common to see red nostrils if I'd painted a red car, and then they introduced lead-based testing for blood testing, and we've evolved fairly quickly, and we've gone from painting in a shed with no filtration, no air movement, maybe the old
the gas heater running,
Mistral fan on the back, and sucking out no air to a full downdraft booth or an end draft booth, so everything's an improvement, and where we are right now, we're everything's breathable air, So and obviously from a commercial based point of view, if someone's going to be a painter, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, this is industry 100%. Standard. This is what you should be looking at, not what your boss supplies you, what you should be supplying yourself.
And I know we've talked about this before, Casey, is, when the panel beater turns up, he's got this massive toolbox and all these tools and all the stuff, and the painter walks in with a
little briefcase
with a couple of spray guns. And I mean, this should be part of any painter's kit.
100%. Whether it's this brand or another brand, some sort of filtration. There's battery operated ones, there's air breathable ones. The battery operated ones they suit a market, but they're not compliant with certain things. So got to be careful if you buy them with being compliant, because you're introducing a electric motor in a.
Oh, okay.
So
there's always something, isn't there?
There's always something. So like they work well, but you got to look into your requirement. So
obviously, we're PPG and we're SATA. So this is the SATA.
This is the
air hood.
This is the SATA 5000 series. The model before that was a 2000 series. Fully breathable. Now this is where it has its own regulator. This one has a filter in it as well, the activated charcoal filter in it. 3 months lifespan on that filter. I don't need this if I've got this set up though. So, and there's a lighter weight version for it. So, so you got an option, but essentially the compressed air comes in here, goes straight to the spray gun, not filtered for the activated charcoal. So there's no restriction to the gun through the filter. The filter is only for my hood only, which comes off of here into this low volume, because doesn't need a high volume. That plugs in here, and that's filtered through this cartridge, not the air for the gun.
And you're saying, I find quite interesting, the little gauge on the side here comes with the cartridge, and when you push the button, it activates that, and it'll actually
Yep.
move up for the 3-month period.
So this one's expired, so it's got a 3-month indicator on it. It's normally white in colour. So now I know that if I pull this out, I have to replace it.
Replace the
it
filter.
Needs to be replaced. Put the new filter in it. I pop the dye bubble, and then it'll wick up this white material of some sort, and it takes 3 months for that to get up into the red, and then you throw it away. So,
technology, eh?
Yeah.
Righto, so that's, needs to be part of the kit.
Yep.
And then obviously between this and your paper mask was obviously the face mask.
Face mask.
And the one I use is, the face one here, and then you can do full face.
Yeah.
There's all sorts out there. And the same thing applies. There's a timing on it.
Yeah.
They have a carbon base as well.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to use one of those masks, don't buy one and think you've got a mask forever, because they've got time frames as well. And if you do your homework on that, you'll see that.
Yeah.
So when you go to this case, obviously it keeps adding to the pressure on that air system.
Yes.
So this one draws, how much air is this going to draw?
6 CFM, which is almost similar to like that primer gun.
Okay, so if I'm running this and I'm running my clear gun, I'm on the limit with, even though I've got quite a large 3-phase compressor, I'm getting to the limit of that being able to keep up with everything I'm doing. So if you've got thoughts down the track you want to do this, you need to make sure when you put your compressor in, you're going to have enough flow.
So in your situation, we're talking 17 CFM on your compressor. With your RP clear coat gun, we're up around the 10 CFM. Okay, if I go HVLP, we're in the 15 CFM.
Just on the gun.
Just on the gun. So then if you add if I go colour gun and then mask, we're way above what the compressor can handle. Now, not saying you're going to choke with no air, the compressor's just not going to stop.
Yeah, and you're going to lose that consistent pressure.
Yeah, and then we start introducing more heat, start introducing more water in steam, wear out your compressor a lot quicker, and so on and so on. That's not including somebody else out here.
Righto, so obviously we can talk about these subjects forever.
Yeah.
I think we've just about covered all my notes, but I think one of the critical things that we spoke earlier about, Casey, was the fact that once you got set up, make sure that the controller on your regulator in your booth is not on flat out.
Flat out, yeah. That's the most common problem.
That needs to come down. It needs to be more than what you want at the spray gun, but you need to limit the flow to the gun so that the compressor is not just going full stick all the time.
Yeah, so if I had this in your workshop, turn your compressor on, if I wound this regulator all the way in, and that'd give me the full pressure what's on your compressed tank. Let's say, for example, it's 10 bar.
Yep.
I don't need 10 bar, okay? I only need what I require at the spray gun, or if I was wearing a hood and a gun. So I would put my hood on, put my spray gun on, turn the spray gun to max, that more than what I would use, max, and then because we've got the gauge on the gun, wind this back until I get to slightly higher than what I need. So let's say clear coat, I would probably clear at 2 bar. The hood I've got a pressure regulator here, but it's only adjusting pressure to the hood. It's going to be running in the background. The gun is I want 2 bar to be clearing with, but I'll set it at 2.2 with full noise on the gun. I'll set it here at the regulator. So I'll wind this down, and it might come down to 4.5 bar at the regulator, but it maintains 2 bar, or 2.2 bar at the gun, no issues whatsoever. So what's happening now is the regulator is regulating the pressure, allowing the compressor to catch up and breathe in the background.
Yep.
So as the compressor will go up and hit a safety cutout, turn off, cool down, get down to another pressure, and then cut back in again, it'll constantly be doing this in the background. The whole point of a regulator is to keep that pressure at the same pressure, okay?
So there's no good having all the best gear unless you use it the right way. That's the thing. And I mean, it's all about maintaining that consistent level at the gun, which is what it's all about.
Yep.
So we want quantity, clean, and consistent pressure at that gun to get the best paint work we can do.
And a common thing that I see in every shop is I got bad pressure, and 99.9% of the time I go to the regulator and it's maxed out.
Yep.
And all they need to do is adjust it properly, and providing that's adjusted correctly, and I haven't got 10 people outside using the air at the same time, which comes into the compressor volume, this should maintain pressure.
Okay. I think we've got it all covered. What I'd like you to do, if you've got any questions or queries, either Casey or myself will answer those on the channel for you. If you like what you're watching, don't forget to subscribe. We need subscribers. We need people to click the like button. We want to keep doing what we're doing. We're fortunate enough to have PPG supporting what we're doing. Thank Casey again for your time, mate.
No problem.
And we will be looking at other things that we can bring that works now that we've got. Our spray gun's clean. We know what gun we're using.
How were they anyway, Howard?
Mate, made a big difference. And you wouldn't believe it. I'm only doing primers at the moment,
Yeah.
but it is noticeable that I don't need to tweak the gun to make it do what it should do. So that's been really good. And we'll just keep looking at now what we need to do. And my aim is to have, in the panel van series as well, what we're working on is to be doing some more. We've got epoxy to do, then we're going to start getting into some primers and things, and hopefully before Christmas we'll get the paint gun back out. So thanks for your time.
No problem.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.